Hi guys, thanks for joining us. Unfortunately, Cumbria Action headquarters has a flat roof and it's about 1 billion degrees in the office, so I've decided to do an outside broadcast today. It's all very modern. Anyway, today we've got something a little bit different. I'm sure many of you are aware of a gentleman called Bill Trotter. Bill was a local resident who went into Cumberland Infirmary for a fairly standard, what would be described as quite a mundane reason for treatment. And Bill never went home. In fact, whilst Bill was in hospital, he was subjected to some truly shocking care, if you dare call it that, treatment. Actually, I would say it was more borderline torture, what he went through. Well, subsequently, Bill's children, Mike and Kelly, have been in search of justice and have started their own campaign to fight back against the authorities, who are basically denying all knowledge and looking the other way. Well, I sat down with Mike and Kelly. The interview is quite long, but it's full of detail and it explains their story, what happened to Bill, what's happened since, and now that it's almost 2 years to the day that their father Bill is in cold storage awaiting burial, it's time to tell this story again, get all this information out there, get behind the family and stand with them, and hopefully we can bring them the justice that they need, for the closure they need, so that their family can grieve properly and move on. This is no way to treat a citizen, no way to treat a gentleman, no, or anybody. So enjoy the interview, do share it, get involved, and if you can, support their campaign. All the details are in the video. And hopefully we can do some good for Bill and the Trotter family. All right, enjoy, thanks. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got Mike Trotter and sister Kelly to talk about their father, Bill. They're both from the Bill Trotter Justice Campaign. If you'd like to start, Mike, and tell us more about your dad.
Great family man, put his family first and foremost. Loved his wife, Joyce, our mum. Loved us as kids. He was firm but fair, I would say my dad was. Very firm but fair.
Kelly, do you want to tell us about your dad?
Madman.
Madman. Why did you say that?
Always a joker.
Yeah.
And he was a good laugh, yeah. Loved his grandkids.
Uh-huh.
He just loved family time, like spend time with mum, going out, meals. He was a foodie. Probably a bit like myself, to be fair, but yeah, he was just a lovely man. He kept himself to himself. Business is business, but outside of work, he was just an amazing dad. I couldn't have asked for any more.
Well, he looks like a lovely guy. I've been looking over your photos as I've been looking at your case, but
Yeah.
okay. Well, he sounds like a lovely man, but something horrendous happened to your dad, Bill. Can you describe to us what actually happened and how it all began?
So, my dad, silly beggar that he was, he stumped his toes at home, and he went to the doctor, and he was getting looked at occasionally back and forwards, but they were getting a bit worse. And one of the nurses actually said, "I'm going to refer you to Carlisle Hospital." So I'm just going to refer to some notes.
Of course.
I forget the dates. So he went on originally the 8th of May, and he was until the 13th of May. Just don't want everything to be factual, that's all. So he went in after stumping his toes, and they said that you don't have, looks like sufficient blood flow running from the top of your leg down to your toes. So we're going to perform an angioplasty, and the angioplasty is just not a stent, but it's like a balloon, widens the arteries. so it'd improve the blood flow. And in there, they also said that you should have maybe, was it one bit of paper, it says 1 to 2 toes, the other one says 2 to 3 toes, amputation, and the or a transmetatarsal, which is half the foot to go away. And he signed the consent forms. Now, when he signed them, a day later after the angioplasty, he was complaining of vomiting and shaking, but then they just discharged him on the 13th of May. Now, the things that kind of spark me, and obviously people would say, well, why did you not know? Well, you don't know until you get the paperwork, is my dad's inflammatory markers called CRPs, short for. He was 57 when he went in. They rose to 81. They rose to 141. Then when he was discharged, they were at 152. So his white blood count as well had increased to 12.7, showing it was to me, when looking back now, it was conditioning wasn't being stable, it wasn't decreasing, it was worsening, but he was discharged far too much earlier than we all family believe. He had the 1 week's course of oral antibiotics. Once they were finished, he progressively got unwell. He started feeling sick, he started to shake, he stopped eating. He got to a point where he was in a local pub in Carlisle having some tea, and he broke down in tears and says, I'm in so much pain. A grown man to be broke down in tears, especially my dad, was quite a big thing. So I got him readmitted on the 26th of May, and his infection markers now at this point were, I think it was about 217. That's his CRP markers were 217. They put it down that he had cellulitis. That was in A&E. They then kept him in, and he was taken up into a ward. We were then told that the infection was basically, it was uncontrollable. It spread to his foot, and he would need a below the knee amputation. Me and Michael asked to speak to the surgeon, because we know by having some kind of surgery like that is very, very life changing. And the way that my dad was, I don't know if he'd have been able to cope or not. But we insisted, is there something else that could be done? Definitely not. It has to be that, or your dad goes home with some more antibiotics, but he might not survive. My dad just wanted the pain to go away. He just said it was to the point where he was touching it and it was just in so much pain, his shin. So we had the operation on the 2nd of June. We were obviously panicking, thinking in case he wouldn't pull through, and he did. And after about half an hour to an hour after surgery, we all went to see him, and what a massive difference in a bloke. And he was happy, he was free of pain. We thought, fantastic. So he was then taken into another ward. He was taken into this ward, everything was fine, it was healed, he had like a bun round it, and it was the 8th of June that I seen a difference in my dad, and I said, what's the matter? And he says, I feel sick. Now, I only know my dad was a bit of a difference because me and my mum had been out shopping, and he always whinged how much we bought on handbags and shoes. And this particular day, he wasn't bothered. Now, to me, that's off. That's odd.
It's out of character.
It's definitely out of character. And my mum had made him Sunday dinners, and he just didn't want it because he wasn't eating really the food in there, because it's not the best. But I insisted a scan. So they'd done a scan of his abdomen, and when the scan results came back, I was told that it was all clear. There's nothing untoward. Everything's fine. So then from the 8th all the way up to the 13th, he decreased eating even more. He was just not bothered. He didn't want to get back out into the wheelchair to go down to the Costa Coffee, which we were regularly doing. And he got taken into another ward, and when he did, my dad was buzzing. And I always remember this, he was buzzing for quite some time. He'd been buzzing over 20 minutes. I got there, I buzzed another 20. And he was lying in his own faeces, because he had like a continent pad on. Couldn't get to the toilet, got your one leg off, he needs help. Yeah. So me and my mum actively, I asked my dad first of all, I was like, okay, I said, it's a bit strange, but you do anything for your parents, which you would, anybody would. And so we cleaned my dad down, and then the nurse finally arrives. I said, sorry, too late. I said, I've done your job. So then I go to the reception, And I put a complaint in saying, it's ridiculous, I shouldn't have to do this. And said, well, we're all far too busy. I insisted that my dad goes into a different ward, which he did. He went into Willoway. He went to Willoway, which was supposedly the renal ward. He went in there, seemed like he perked up a little bit more. We're now on to just after the 13th, and me and my mum thought something's not quite right with my dad. Felt as if like his liver was swollen, he was just really lethargic. We thought he'd had a possible stroke. They checked him over. No, there's nothing wrong with your dad, it's just what old people do. I said, sorry, what? I thought it's a queer thing to say. And even on his medical notes, that would back up what I've just said, because on his medical notes even states that family had concerns as back as the 13th and the 14th of June that Bill possibly had a stroke. Nothing was done. So it was Father's Day. We were all there round as a family. He was not bothered with the grandchildren, which was very, very out of character. Again, we brought him a Father's Day dinner in, he wasn't bothered. And I stayed longer because he was having issues with his peritoneal dialysis machine, which is like a little small machine hooked up to his bed, and the alarms kept going off. Now, when I stopped even longer, my dad says, oh, what's that noise? I said, it's nothing, Dad, there's nothing going on. The shooting. I said, what do you mean the shooting? I said, where do you think you are? He says, I'm in Lancaster Hospital, in a basement, there's a shootout, take cover. What? I said, who was round your bed? He says, well, it was you, there was Michael, and who else? And he didn't know. So I got the doctor to come. She done like a physical exam of him. He failed that. He took him down for just a normal abdomen scan, because the one on the 8th was a pelvis and abdomen. And the normal abdomen scan come back that he had a significantly distended bladder. Now, when it was all questioned, it turns out that scan on the 8th was something wrong. And it's in asterisks, alert, alert, alert. Significant findings, significantly distended bladder, to the point where the words are far too complex and technical for us to kind of pronounce, but it's urine backing up into his kidneys and pushing up his chest cavity. So that's obviously, and he was feeling full. That's the whole why he felt full. He felt sick. He couldn't be bothered. So they eventually put a catheter into my dad, which we've got documentation of it and evidence of it, that they drained the 900, well, it looks like it's over 900 millilitres of turbid push urine. Very thick, very gloopy. And they tested his urine, which come back with enterococcus and candida, which again, we're not medical people, so we didn't know at the time. And enterococcus is quite a serious UTI infection, and that's kind of why he didn't know where he was. So they put him on antibiotics, and they done various other scans on him. And then they come back a few days later, which we were looking at about 23rd, 24th, and said, we think your dad's got some kind of perianal infection. So, what do you mean perianal infection? Looks like he's got a bit of a gas tract infection going up from his backside. What can you do there? Well, we can have a look and maybe pack the wound. What wound? Because none of us knew anything about this at the time. Then it was the 26th to the 28th, so correct me if I'm wrong with the dates. There was the head of vascular, the surgeon, the renal consultants, and another doctor all came round the bed with the ward manager. Stated that, so there's nothing much more we can do. It's end of life for your dad. Sorry, what? And my dad turned around and says to the surgeon who amputated his leg, he says, I put my trust in you. He says, and you failed me. And I always remember he looked at me and Michael, he went, get me the hell out of here now. So we did. We were ringing private ambulance services. We asked Carlisle if we could go to Newcastle. They refused us. We said, we'll do what we can to get our own ambulance. We just couldn't get we couldn't get anybody. We requested, can we bring our own private care in? So can we maybe draft in our own nurses, our own costs, not asking anybody else to pay for it? They weren't prepared to do that. They offered us then to put him in his own room, to which now we're on the back end of June, and they tried him on an antibiotic called clindamycin. Clindamycin. applied him an antibiotic called clindamycin, and within 24 hours, there was a dramatic change in my dad. And my dad said to me, he says, can you roll us over? So we rolled him over, and he says, what's that on my backside? So we pulled the continent pad down, and the hole that my dad had was this big.
Shocking.
And the wounds either side, which now they call anal fissures, were like, they called it a kissing moisture, were like the length of my finger either side. We weren't told as a family, like at all, and it was only because we rolled. My dad didn't even know,
Right.
at all about it. So he started to improve on this medication called clindamycin. We thought, great, yep, his infection markers were coming down.
So it finally felt like he was improving.
We felt like he was improving, but they kept saying he's still end of life. He would have to have surgery. They're not prepared to do it because of his age. I said, well, can we not try some different things? I was speaking to people in America. I was looking at things online. Some kind of like a Botox thing. There was injections. There was all sorts that we were just trying to do what we could. Pack the wound, flush the wound. No, they're not prepared to do it. So then, jumping forward, he just stopped eating as much. A couple of hypos he'd had, not too significant. He wasn't being monitored properly. We were actively feeding him, and what we found is my dad wasn't really like holding the knife and fork and the cup and things properly. So we thought that was a bit odd. Again, you never think anything of it until now when you've read the notes.
You got to be realistic and look that if somebody's had 16 days of toxins inside the body, what's that going to do to them? Has there been any testing?
That should be a major point
there been
there.
Any testing for any?
Your dad went 16 days with a full bladder.
It was because the last time he urinated, when now we're having a look on the notes, was the second. So it was the day before, the 1st of June. Which shows he actively urinated. It says PUT, patient using toilet. Now the reason why they didn't bother the backside to check is because they just put dialysis and scored it on the input and output fluid balance charts.
They just presumed.
And he did actively urinate. On other notes it does state he did. So you can't pick and choose. He urinates one day and not the next day. And his body was just accumulating and nobody had bothered to even check. So 16 days. Because the last time was the 1st, operation on the 2nd of June.
And they said this had a minimal effect.
So then they decided to change his medication, which I will still say it, that he had some adverse reaction to it because he was struggling to breathe. And we also walked in one day, his stump was really, really shiny. A nurse had put the wound care gel for my dad's backside onto his new amputated stump, and the next day, because I've got again all pictures, the stitches had dissolved and his wound had opened up, and it was just left. It wasn't dressed, it was just left for more bacteria, more infection just to go in there and grow.
This is shocking.
We kept going for several calls. He's having a heart attack. This is it. End of life. Get there. My dad had a mask on his face. He was going, get it off. He was just agitated because we kept shoving a mask on his face.
Right.
He didn't want the mask there. And he was perfectly fine. He was perfectly fine. To us, I feel like we were getting our dad back. Now, looking back on the blood work, he got to one point, the CRP inflammatory markers, he got to 254. That's really, you should be no more than 5.
Right.
0 to 5 is someone healthy, 5 to 15 is like a mild infection. My dad was 254, coming up to the hundreds in sepsis territory.
Yeah.
Days before he died, he got down to 60. But he wasn't getting any better. So from 254 to 60.